Good morning, everyone. We're going to get ready and start our meeting. If I can just have a little bit of calm in the room. I know it's very exciting. We haven't seen each other in weeks. It's the Raptors, I know. Go Raps, go. So I would like to start today's meeting by acknowledging that we are on the traditional lands of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, and also home to many Aboriginal peoples, and we're very grateful to be here. As we do at the Disabilities Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee meeting, we start by introducing everyone in the room. So those who are around the committee members will be aware of who is actually in our presence. And we generally start by going to the outside chambers and then eventually moving through to the inside and all around. So just about everybody in the room will get a chance to introduce themselves if you have a microphone. If you do not, then I'm going to ask you to speak loudly. And all I'm looking for is your name, or perhaps your staff position if you work for the City of Toronto, or the association that you're here representing. And I'm going to start at the very, very far left there.
My name is Ariane Robinson. I am a news site called
Great, thank you.
Hello, I'm Karen Cosmos. I work for TTC and
My name is Dean Milton, and I work with the TTC for WheelTrans.
My name is Gabby Birch. I'm the chair of the RPAC committee.
Wonderful. Okay, Joe?
Joe.
I'm Wendy Porch, committee member.
Rahima Mullah, co-chair.
Terry Lynn Langdon, committee member.
And Kristen Wong-Tam, chair of the committee.
Janice Dix with the City Clerk's office.
Tom Proszowski.
Martin Cursells.
Yin Brown, committee member as well, representing Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians.
Stephanie Osario, committee member, formerly at the Canadian Hearing Society, but now an independent.
Victoria Warner, committee member.
Great.
Monica Winkler, the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work.
Nicole Cormier, Accessibility Consultant, Equity, Diversity, and Human Rights.
So wonderful. So thank you very much for the round of introduction. So we know now who is in the room, and those who with the microphone. I'm just going to remind you that when it's time for you to speak, is to make sure your microphone is on, and then just speak right into the microphone. So we have what is a very short agenda because there's only 2 items on there, but yet it's actually a very important agenda. So we are here for meeting number 9, and this is a special meeting that's been called, and we specifically want to go through a few things on the agenda. So the first thing is I'm going to ask whether or not there's any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, we have 2 items. The first one is DI 9.1, WheelTrans 10-year strategy, which we will hold for presentations, which we'll receive shortly. And the second item is DI 9.2, 5-year review of the Affordable Housing Action Plan. Again, it is held for presentation. And there are no other additions to the agenda and no new actually we cannot introduce new business, I believe. We're going to proceed, just adopt the order paper. All those in favor, raise your hand if you can. Thank you, that is adopted. So we will receive a presentation from Eve Wiggins, who is the head of WheelTrans Service Delivery Group from the TTC. And her presentation is on the WheelTrans 10-year strategy. Please go ahead, Eve.
Good morning. I'm Eve Wiggins, and
TTC, and it is an absolute honor and pleasure to be here with you today. What we wanted to do is make sure that we came to this committee to bring you information on, and details on the WheelTrans 10-year strategy. So I will proceed through this presentation, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, opportunity at the end. So I'll be taking you through some background, the history of WheelTrans, where we started, current trends, and the future, what the future brings, and how we propose to meet it. So a little bit on the history. WheelTrans was established in 1975 as Paraway Transit. It was a private operation run by private contractors in the 1970s, and they had 8 vehicles at the time. The TTC took over operation and the WheelTrans department was formed in 1989, and the implementation of the first software system, so before it was just paper, it evolved over time from 1984 to 1994, and the eligibility that we are using today was developed 20 years ago in 1996. Currently, our customers, we have over 45,000, in fact, we're up to 47,000 active WheelTrans registrants. 79% are permanent, and 76% of our users are over the age of 65. We receive approximately 1,000 to 1,200 applications a month and sign on 800 to 900 new customers every month. The eligibility assessment is done through an interview with a third party. The TTC contracts out that function, and it's to assess the physical and functional mobility in the home, around the home, and in the community at large. And again, there's 2 categories, such as temporary, so if somebody's had a hip replacement or knee surgery and they just need it for a short while before they return back to their normal activities or normal transit use, or permanent, where somebody is permanently in a mobility device or has a mobility impairment that renders it too difficult to use the conventional system. So our customers are divided between categories of ambulatory and non-ambulatory. It was formerly a 50-50 share between those, so ambulatory are considered those with a walker, cane, or collapsible wheelchair, and non-ambulatory are those in a permanent mobility device. But our growing customer base is ambulatory, and that is certainly indicative of the aging senior population in Toronto. So while always the majority, our ambulatory customers now take 80% of our trips. And that is a growing trip base. We're experiencing extreme high demand. So we certainly have, what is good is an active population that is using WheelTrans. Our service is delivered across 3 modes. So we all know the famous WheelTrans bus, and that presently delivers around 27% of our trips. Then we contract out to sedan taxis, which we've seen in the city, and then of course accessible taxis. We also contract out those, and that covers the remaining 73% of our trips. As we continue to migrate trips to the most cost-effective mode, that is our goal while we continue to maximize the WheelTrans fleet. Our average trip length is just under 10 kilometers, with 32% of our trips actually under 6 kilometers, and the remaining 68% at 6 kilometers or more provides us with an opportunity for change and a way of adapting and providing an even greater volume of service to all customers and new customers. In 2014, the TTC board approved the addition of 6 reservationists, so those are the people that answer our calls and book trips, and with the intent to lower our call abandonment rate, which was up to well over 30%. So that means sometimes some customers had to wait 45 minutes potentially on hold waiting to book their trip. But the more calls answered equaled increase in demand, more trips booked, and we also lowered the unaccommodated rate. So that meant fewer and fewer people did not receive the rides that they wanted, and actually almost everybody received the trip that they were asking for. In 2015, the surge in demand continued, and with the board approving an additional 7 reservationists, so by this time we were up 13 to our call center, almost doubling our call center. And again, more reservationists means they're allowed to book more trips, and more trips increases our demand, and our call abandonment rate is down to, certainly last summer, it was down to 10%. Virtually 3 rings and somebody was picking up the call. So our growth forecast for last year was 7%, and our actual was 12.4% growth. So the future, as I'm sure everyone in this room is aware, that there will be changes to the AODA, makes us change our eligibility, which is good for customers, in that it opens up our eligibility to include any customer with a disability that prevents them from using the conventional system. So the eligibility starting January 1, 2017 will have obviously that continue with mobility impairments, but also cognitive impairments, potentially sensory impairments, and any other impairments, again, that renders somebody a disability that renders you unable to take the conventional system. In addition, we have to add that third category. We will continue with temporary, there might always be a temporary need for somebody to use WheelTrans, but then we would move to renaming the permanent category to unconditional and introducing a third category called conditional, meaning sometimes some conditions present themselves that render somebody unable to use conventional and they need WheelTrans, and sometimes they don't, and then they can happily use the conventional system. In addition, there's a statement, a quote which I've put in the AODA, which states that the transportation service provider shall provide same-day service to the extent that it's available. So what this means for us is we've done some projected demand scenarios with the new eligibility criteria and looking at what has happened to other transit properties that have already made the change and introduced all forms of disability, is that we're forecasting, and this is just a medium growth forecast, but a 20% growth in demand. So we've already increased demand by 25% over the last 2 years. And next year, we are forecasting 20% growth just for next year. And again, we see that trend continuing for the next couple of years. So last year, we had 3.4 million trips. This year, we are forecasting 3.9 million trips. And by 2025, if we continue with the high forecast, we are forecasting 10 million annual trips. And that is something that if we continue on the way we are, the WheelTrans budget will just expand and expand and expand, and that's not the most efficient way to provide the service, nor what we worry of is running into a situation where demand will exceed the supply of the service available, and that's not what we want either. So we developed a 10-year plan to help us lead the way forward. And what we're calling it is the family of services. The TTC provides a family of services which includes not only its WheelTrans buses, but taking advantage of the significant investment in accessibility across the TTC. It uses all buses, which are now 100% accessible. Streetcars, the new streetcars, when we get them, they are 100% accessible. The subways, right now we're at 50% of subway stations are accessible, but that is growing by 3 or 4 stations every year. And then the community buses, which there are 6 routes right now that is considered accessible, and they actually have the benefit of pulling right into the driveway of a hospital, for example, and they often connect a subway station with a hospital. And of course, the specialized buses. In 2012, the City of Toronto Auditor General also recommended that we integrate WheelTrans service into the conventional transit system. And it specifically mentioned that sustaining the level and quality of services required new ways of operating the WheelTrans program. It asked that we developed and implemented a comprehensive plan for integrating WheelTrans customers into the accessible conventional transit system. And it also made sure to add that we also included customer service training to all TTC staff, with, at that time, particular emphasis on assisting people with mobility difficulties, but quite frankly, it's with assisting people with any disability. So in the future, and I'm afraid this doesn't work, it's a animated graphic, but the idea is right now is that if a customer lived in Eglinton West, and that was their point A, and they were traveling to somewhere such as Fairview Mall or in the Fairview Mall area, which is the Don Mills and Shepherd area. Formerly, the WheelTrans bus would pick them up at Eglinton West and travel across town in all of the traffic and take them to Fairview Mall. And because we are a shared ride service, probably picking up and dropping off other customers along the way. What the future is that the WheelTrans bus would pick the customer up at their point A and take them to the nearest accessible location. In this example, it would be Eglinton subway station. And the customer themselves would travel to the accessible interchange station at Yonge and Shepherd, and then travel along the Shepherd Line 4 and arrive at their destination. If their destination was beyond, for example, Fairview Mall, then another WheelTrans vehicle would be there to pick them up and take them onwards. And with the idea of is that the bus in their home location, once dropping them off, could continue to provide other service in that area. And the bus in the destination location would also be servicing other customers, waiting for this particular customer to arrive, and not tying up one vehicle for the full trip across the city in the traffic. So the path to family of services means that we are looking at migration over a 10-year time frame. This is not something we're planning to do quickly. We need to do this properly with consideration for our customers and for all our new customers. And as I mentioned, that's up around 1,000 customers a month. So this year, what we're focusing on is changing to AODA the new eligibility. So that means changing our application form. It means the assessment process needs to change so that we're able to assess beyond just mobility disabilities. As well, the appeals process needs to change. And all the internal processes in order to do that needs to change. So we're focused on that as well, creating a more unified operation between us and our neighboring transit operations of York Region Transit, Durham Transit, and Peel Region Transit to provide better connections between the two regions, and also working with Metrolinx and the GO connections. In 2017, we look to RFP and get a new software system. With the idea of family of services is that WheelTrans will be booking the trip, potentially for those who are conditional eligibility. We would be booking the trip for you. So all of our software system, our scheduling system needs to be able to account for all the fixed route opportunities available, taking into account each customer and their abilities. We are also looking at a new vehicle. The WheelTrans fleet is aging. It's 10 years old now and getting older by the minute, and we need a new vehicle. It's doing a lot more short trips, so we need a more nimble vehicle that also accounts for the growing ambulatory customer base. So we'll be looking for volunteers to start a family of services pilot. We know that at least 30% of our customers also take the conventional system, so we'd like to formalize that type of travel and help the customer do that, and then also that we learn before we attempt to make any changes for any customers, for example, who don't do that. And as well, for those customers who've never had WheelTrans before, all the new customers, is to offer them the continued freedom of movement that they're used to enjoying. In 2020, we're looking at the new streetcar fleet full deployment. We hope, and then we will continue further migration. And then in 2025, the stations must be 100% accessible in accordance with AODA. So at that time, we'll be looking to migrate a larger proportion. Remember, we're forecasting we'll be at about 10 million annual trips at that point. None of this can be done without extensive customer and community outreach, which we are embarking on, such as presenting to this forum, and also significant internal TTC training to make sure that the rest of the conventional TTC is ready for the customers it will be serving. The benefits is that we will realize a fully accessible TTC. We're looking to improve customer service, and provide sustainable, efficient, and cost-effective, accessible transit services. And really the bottom line is about freedom of travel, spontaneity of travel, and dignity and opportunity for all customers. Right now, with a WheelTrans trip, you have to book a minimum of 24 hours in advance. Really, that's not like other transit users who could just show up when they feel like it, make plans when they feel like it, and the way they go. We need to make WheelTrans as equal a spontaneous service. So by 2025, the goal is that 50% of our service will be a family of services trip, which means some portion of the trip will be on conventional, but the remainder of the trip will be as required by the customer, either a dedicated bus or accessible taxi, or indeed sedans. The opportunity is that we can reduce the average trip length from just under 10 kilometers to just under 6 kilometers, and by doing so, then we increase the level of service and the volume of service available. There's a 10-year financial impact to this, is that we are ballpark a capital and operational investment of approximately $50 million, and that business case is going to the TTC board as part of the 2017 budget ask. But we are seeing a capital cost avoidance of $140 million and an operational cost avoidance of well over $300 million over the 10 years. And the benefit means that when we can avoid cost and growing our costs, we are actually convert that into more trips. So the transformational program that will support the 10-year strategy is 5 objectives: a new service model, community and stakeholder engagement, culture change, financial sustainability, and regional partnerships across 13 initiatives to deliver on the strategy. Thank you.
Eve, thank you very much for your presentation. That was a lot of information, and I think you've presented in a very concise fashion. I suspect there will probably be some questions from our committee members, and we'd like to address those now. If you can raise your hand, I see you, Martin, to ask questions, and then Yin, hold on. I'm just building a speakers list here. Anyone else? Okay, Victoria, thank you. And Tom. Okay, I'm going to move to the other side of the room. Terry, Lynn, and Wendy, Joe, Karma, Rahima. Okay. Their questions may prompt more questions from you or maybe satisfy the questions that you have. We're going to start with Martin and then Yin. Go ahead, Martin.
Hi there. I guess my question is twofold. First off, I was wondering if there was ever a consideration of making a customer-facing portal where you'd be able to set up your own rides with WheelTrans instead of going through the phones. And second, was there ever research on doing an app where you could track the ride coming towards you?
May I answer, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
Through you, Madam Chair. Actually, our trips are booked 50-50, so we do have an online reservation system, so customers can go online and book their own trips. However, with the seniors population that not all have adapted to technology, they still like the phone calls, and not all changes can be done online, but with the purpose of the new software system, we are looking to expand the availability of all different types of bookings and changes online as well. To answer your second question, absolutely, we are looking at an app. So with the intent of the customer can book from their app, the customer can check where their vehicle is. We'd like also vehicle notification. If you want to set up to find out at 10 minutes prior to your trip, your bus is 10 minutes away, so that you know you need to leave your home or leave your apartment and take the elevator down, etc. That's the intent of the app. So absolutely, we're you can do, and to answer your second question, we're looking at expanding that. So yes.
Okay, Yin to ask questions.
Okay. So a point of clarification, so if with the family of services, I have 2 questions. The first one is, so you get picked up from your home and driven to a, say, subway station, but along the way, the vehicle is also picking up other riders, is that it? And the second question is, you said there would be a pilot for the family of services. I guess, at what point is this this committee involved? Are we sort of involved at the beginning of the pilot or the consultation stage, or do we at the back end? Just let me, clarify that. Thanks.
So through you, Madam Chair, so if your first question is, would they be picking somebody up along the way? I'd say that depends. The intent of WheelTrans is that it is a shared ride service. If it made logical sense, scheduling sense to pick up another customer, if both were traveling in the same direction to the same accessible stop location, then yes. If not, if it didn't make sense to do that on the trip, then no, it would just be pick up in a direct ride. And to answer, of course, could you ask your second question again?
Sorry, it's clear. At which point would this committee be involved in the family of services pilot or the consultation stage for that part?
So again, through you, Madam Chair, this is, the TTC has its it has its advisory committee on accessible transit. So we're certainly working hand in hand and in tandem with ACAT, and there is a WheelTrans subcommittee on that. For those customers that are potentially also on this committee, the opportunity could be that they could participate, or if this committee requested that we come back and make another presentation of what it looks like, I would be more than happy to come back and provide further details as you want them.
Okay, and you would be very much welcome back. Victoria, questions?
Hi. I have a concern that there's still a focus on the in-home capability of somebody to move around to access WheelTrans, because being able to move around in your home doesn't have much to do with being able to travel within the community. So there are many people that are able to get around their home, but getting to and from places, that's where the issues start. So there may be people that are being cut out of WheelTrans that could really use the service.
Through you, Madam Chair, you're absolutely right, and that is what's wrong with the current process and a current assessment process. The new application and the new assessment process will not measure how you get around in your home, and it really is going to be about your ability to use conventional transit. It's not about your ability to move from your kitchen to your living room, for example.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Okay, so with the new conditional category, what kind of things will it involve? Do you know yet? Will it be like during certain weather, or if somebody has an episodic disability? Is that the type of things it will cover?
Through you, Madam Chair, precisely. So episodic could be somebody with a good day, bad day condition. So some days they feel good and they can do their own thing, and other days they need WheelTrans service. That's what it should be reserved and available for. And then others could be in the summertime, no problem. They can use their mobility device on the sidewalks, to and from, go here and there. But in the winter, when there's precipitation on the ground, or if it gets so cold their batteries freeze on their mobility device, then again, the intention is that would be a condition, and we would provide that service during that time. It's really conditional. The category of conditional is really to try to treat everyone as an individual. That's why we need a new software, so that your specific conditions could be registered in there, and you're treated as an individual based on your own conditions and your own ability, really.
Okay, thank you very much, Victoria. Tom, to ask questions?
I have 3 questions. Can I go with that, or just one at a time?
Yeah, I think one at a time would probably be best.
Sorry,
Otherwise,
it helps me.
Eve might be overwhelmed.
Okay, the first one is service standards. I like the idea of integrating the mobility of people with disabilities within a conventional system, because that brings us forward into the community and integrates us into the normal stream of life, which is a great thing. But my concern is there a service standard for the transition between, let's say, a subway stop and a parallel transit vehicle coming to pick me up at the stop?
You're absolutely right. Through you, Madam Chair, that is something that we do need to develop, is what is an acceptable wait time There might always be delays, but on a normal operating basis, what is an acceptable wait time? Certainly, we have on-time performance based on the trip. So within that trip, now that we're building in connections, what is an acceptable connection? The nice thing is if we're connecting to a service with high frequency, you won't be waiting a long time. So really the key is to make sure, and again, the new software will help us do that. If you're connecting to a bus route, for example, that has 15-minute headway or something less frequency, we'll be able in real time to know whether that trip has been missed, if the conventional trip has been missed. So the intent right now, the thinking is that we'll just drive you onwards. WheelTrans will continue to take you to the destination.
Next question?
Thank you. Next question?
Did you not have
Sure, yes, I do.
Go ahead, Tom.
Notwithstanding the fact that global warming and the weather is improving in Toronto, in the winter, getting to a subway station is a difficult process sometimes for people who use mobility devices. Will there be any kind of assistance or insurance that access to subway stations between the vehicle drop-off and entry into the subway system will be facilitated somehow?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's a good question. Certainly for anyone access into a subway station, it is the TTC's job to keep the access ways clear for anyone, whether they're being dropped off by WheelTrans or walking in. Certainly during a heavy precipitation event, we do our best to keep it clear, but there'll continue to be assistance. So for example, if WheelTrans is dropping off, WheelTrans will continue to help somebody right into the station as they do now. That won't be okay, we're just going to slow down and away you go. The WheelTrans trip will still be carried out as it always is and taken to the first accessible doors. Right now, that's how we're looking at it.
Thank you. And my final question is about the integration between family of services within Toronto with the neighboring cities, municipalities.
So is your question, how are we going to do that?
Is there any plan for integrating, for example, if I wanted to travel to Mississauga?
So we have an MOU right now signed with Peel, Durham, and York that if you're eligible in their area, you're automatically eligible in ours and vice versa. We're working towards an MOU of a common application form, a common standards of eligibility. And then as far as connecting to their system, that is an ultimate goal, is that we'll be able to do that and provide the trip more seamlessly. Right now, if it's WheelTrans to Mobility Plus, for example, you're not guaranteed that your service level times of what time the drop-off and what time the pickup is. We're working to tighten that. We're even talking about a common booking software system so that it's a completely integrated system. That is the future we're talking, but certainly the good thing is I can let you know we're talking. We meet regularly, and the goal is to work more seamlessly together.
And is the GO Train integrated into the family system as well?
Metrolinx is at the table, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
That's very encouraging to hear. Terry Lynn, ask questions, and then followed by Wendy.
I guess I'm very concerned. I keep hearing stories from peers and things, because I don't currently take WheelTrans, that people can get suspended from WheelTrans, and sometimes it's up to a month. And I see that as like a very clear human rights violation. And so while we're talking about, making new forms and like bringing more people on board to be more inclusive and in line with the AODA, it's not really addressed in here, but I don't actually think that it's acceptable for that to be happening. So I'm just wondering what WheelTrans is doing to make this system less punitive, right? Because an able-bodied rider of the TTC, if they miss their trip, they miss their trip. They're late for their thing, but they can take another bus or they can get on a streetcar or whatever. So I do want to know what's happening in that way, because I do think that needs to change in the system.
Through you, Madam Chair, I agree with you. It is there are punitive measures right now. The funny thing is that in that 2012 Auditor General report, which we mentioned, they wanted to make sure that we were enforcing. So we have some policies of suspensions regarding late cancellations and no-shows. And the reason for that is that our trip subsidy is $31 a trip. So the budget from our subsidy to WheelTrans is $31 for each trip. So when a customer misses that trip, we're not able right now to schedule somebody else in that trip. So if we had people on the wait list, unless we can match exactly the type of trip, we wouldn't be able to put them in. So we were requested to put in some kind of means to incent people to make sure that they were taking their trips, because if somebody doesn't take it, if they're a late cancellation or a no-show, it's a lost cost and a lost opportunity there for somebody who is waiting who would have taken it. Having said all that, the goal is to create more capacity or more understood and controlled capacity with a better scheduling system so that we can take those same-day trips. So we know we have customers who in the morning, they wake up and they don't feel well. They know they have a trip in the afternoon, and unfortunately, either they're forced to take that trip or provide an explanation. And yeah, is it the most dignified thing to do? No, I wouldn't say that it is, given that we are going towards freedom of travel and spontaneity. So the idea is to create a more flexible system with a better scheduling system so that it's okay for you to cancel because we can easily book somebody else in that trip. So that is the goal, to go towards a less punitive system and get away from late cancellation and no-show penalties. Certainly we forgive as much as possible. If you're sick, you're sick, and we accept that, and we will certainly remove that from your file. But I think sometimes there is right now the only way that WheelTrans has been instructed to incent customers. That is something we are looking at stepping away from.
Do you have a? Okay, so hold on to your comment, and I suspect that you would. I suspect that your sentiment might be shared by others in our committee, but you'll have an opportunity to speak on that soon. Wendy, 2 questions, please.
I have a couple of questions, actually. One of my questions relates to this idea of flexibility. So, and coming back to the eligibility criteria too around conditional, and I know we were talking a little bit about people with episodic disabilities, but can you explain to me how is the system going to be agile enough to accommodate somebody who can walk today but can't walk tomorrow? Because at the last meeting, we heard a discussion of how long it takes for people to become reinstated on the system, and it actually can take a significant period of time. So can you explain to me what are the steps that are being undertaken to, for example, if we're using the conditional eligibility criteria, and it's intended to address people who have relapsing remitting MS, who today are having difficulty, or can walk today but can't walk tomorrow, and then next week might have to shift their eligibility as well. Are you looking at a system that will accommodate that?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that's exactly the system that we're looking at. So when they go through the new registration process, so if it's a new customer, they go through the new registration process, that will capture the type of conditions that they have. If their condition is good day, bad day, to simplify it, if their condition is good day, bad day, then it's really up to them to book or not book. So if the customer calls up and I'm booking today, or uses their app and books a trip, there's no stopping them from doing that. If the condition, if they have that condition of good day, bad day, and we analyze their trip use and that it's daily for over a certain period, then it's probably just worth a conversation and saying, maybe this isn't your condition anymore, maybe we should just remove that. And then that becomes, then you can continue to use WheelTrans as you need to, rather than assuming there's good day, bad day. So really the intent is for the customer to tell us, and then for the booking system to be sophisticated enough to know what you need.
Can I ask a
Yes, you have
So
time.
thank you for that. So it can also be good morning, bad afternoon.
Yes.
So as a follow-up to Terry Lynn's question, is there actually work underway for the development of a flexible scheduling system?
Yes.
So are you currently doing work right now on that?
Yes, we're currently gathering requirements, so this is exactly the comments that we need a flexible scheduling system so that we can accept a morning cancellation for an afternoon trip, and then somebody else, your neighbor, could take that space for you, because, again, it's easy to book same day again. That's the intent.
Can I ask one more?
You have time.
What is the rollout? When do you consider that to be available to customers to try?
So we won't be putting the RFP out until next year.
Okay.
And then it's going to take a couple of years, because we're basically taking out our operating system and installing a new operating system. So that's going to be 2 or 3 years, and I'm guessing by the time we RFP, by the time we get a successful bidder and attempt to not disrupt the current operation before we can put the new operation in. It's going to take some time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to, I see Victoria's hand going up, and because we're in the advisory committees, sometimes our rules are a little bit relaxed, but I also know that we have some time constraints because we have another big item around the housing report that has to be dealt with. Short questions? Okay, so hang on to the comment. Stephanie, you have another question. Okay, so I'm going to allow Victoria and Stephanie to ask their questions, and then we're going to move into, I have a question also from Tracy Odell, who's a member of our committee, which I'm going to take carriage of, but we're going to move into comments very shortly. Is that all right with the committee members? Okay. Just so you know, in other cases, the other committees, they don't often ask for permission, they just do it. But here we like to work more collaboratively. So Victoria, then Stephanie, please.
So I just have a quick question. If you will be adding live notifications for elevator problems, so if you're integrating WheelTrans into the rest of the service, that people will be aware of what's going on, and that will be taken into account when booking the WheelTrans trips.
Through you, Madam Chair, absolutely. That's an essential part of the family of services success, is that we must be able to let customers know immediately. We must need to know so that we can automatically reschedule. If an accessibility device is out, we need to reschedule all those trips that we're going through that location until it's back up again. So yes, that's the intent.
Stephanie, go ahead.
My question is related to education of the public using the TTC, or the traditional system. One of the challenges that I often hear about is that people who have ambulatory issues often are pushed aside and people rush past them. And I know that there is signage and such, and the TTC only has so much within its power and control. But in all of this, is there, in the plan, is there something in place to do wider and greater education of the public?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, there is. We are bringing in a specific communications resource to do just that, is really working on the communications rollout to all audiences, and a huge audience will be the conventional system riders, to make sure that they're aware of of a new type of customer that's joining the system. Yes.
That's great, thank you very much. We're heading into comments now. One more question. Go ahead, Wendy, but only because you're you, and go ahead, Tom, because only because you're you. Okay.
So my question is this: with the introduction of the new eligibility criteria of conditional, is there envisioned a reconsideration of people who are currently in as unconditional, and whether or not they would transition to the conditional sector?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that is the plan, is to, in order to make sure we don't have 2 tiers of customers. As I mentioned, we sign on 1,200, and we could be, now that we're capturing unserved members of the public. Previously, we could be up to 1,500 applicants a month for WheelTrans service. So yes, we will over time. That's not something that we are tackling immediately, but certainly we think it'll take we're at 47,000 active registrants, potentially over 3 years' time. We hope to re-register all of our customers so that everyone is properly registered, again, so that we treat each person as an individual and they're captured in the system properly.
Okay, thank you. Tom?
I hope I know the answer to this question, but I need to ask it anyway. Since using the family of services, I may be picked up by WheelTrans, taken to a subway station, then picked up by WheelTrans again to take to my destination. Does that mean one ticket, and will the ticket be transferable from one point of system to another?
Through you, Madam Chair, absolutely, one ticket, one fare. It would work like connecting through across any modes, any of the modes that we have now. You could connect through from the subway to the bus on one fare. WheelTrans is having Presto installed by the end of this year. We'll be going to Presto as well, so yes.
Okay, thank you very much. We're heading into, Joe, you haven't asked a question. You want to ask a question now? Okay.
I guess my
And then I'm definitely going to close it off. We're moving into comments. Go ahead.
well, my question is it developed from some of the other questions, and maybe it was answered. But for individuals for the family of services, that process wouldn't work, then the traditional sort of system where picked up at point A, dropped off at your destination would continue.
Through you, Madam Chair, absolutely. We know there are those customers who just, their abilities don't lend themselves to the conventional system. That's why we want to make WheelTrans available for those who really need it.
Okay, thank you very much. I have questions from a member who's not here today, but I know that this issue is very important to her. Part of the question you've somewhat touched on, but if I can ask you for more specifics. So number one was the involvement of DAAC, this particular committee, in the consultation process. At what particular point and stages can we, as this committee, be involved with what you're doing to feed into the ongoing evaluation and work program?
At every stage of major change, we intend to go out for consultation. So we're just embarking now, hence my request to come here. We're just embarking now on the new application form, the new eligibility criteria. We'll be heading out for consultation for that over the next couple of months. We're looking to take the new proposed eligibility application form, appeal process, et cetera, to the to the TTC board for September is our goal. So we have quite a bit of work to do on that change first, and then we'll be implementing the change, and then we'll start to look at family of services. Again, anytime this committee wants me to come back, other involvement, participation, direct one-to-one contact, honestly, we are open to really making this the best it can be for all customers, so we need the feedback and your advice and counsel.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to open the floor for comments now. And I see Victoria's hand go up. Go ahead.
This is just a note to please take back, but the notifications for escalator maintenance do not go up on the website in advance. They often go up the day of. I did this through a Wayback Machine check. And this may not be something that has been considered, but escalators are part of a station being accessible, and somebody may not be able to use that station if the escalator is down.
Okay, thank you, Victoria. Are there any other comments? Sorry?
Sorry, Terry Lynn had one, and she's just come back into the room.
Oh, okay, sure. So we'll hear from Wendy first, and then Terry Lynn.
So my comment is a bit about history. I was working at the advocacy at Arch, which is a legal aid clinic for people with disabilities, many, many years ago, more than I like to actually remember. But at the time, there was a reassessment of people with disabilities who were using WheelTrans. So there was a system-wide reassessment. People were, in essence, removed from the system and asked to requalify for the system. And it was, and I mentioned this at the last meeting, and I'm bringing it up again because it had a profound impact on the community of people with disabilities in Toronto. People couldn't get to their appointments, they couldn't get to their jobs. It was a crisis. So my comment is just that in considering the eligibility criteria, and in particular, people who are designated as permanent, being streamed into conditional, that could be very problematic for a number of people. So I would recommend having the community, having our committee involved as soon as possible, broad consultations, and a very clear appeals process for people, because really, the change in that status could be life-altering for someone with a disability who relies on the system.
Thank you very much. Terry Lynn to speak.
I wanted to speak again to the punitive measures that currently exist in the WheelTrans system when people miss their rides. And part of what I want to say is I want this system to take responsibility for the problems that it creates, right? So a lot of times folks will try to book return, trips going there and return trips, and they might not get a return trip. Or they're told to call like that morning and see if they get the return trip and stuff. So that's one barrier. And additionally, there are sometimes other barriers, like I was just rolling in, but like sometimes, you intend for the system to be working and the elevator is down or some such like that. So because I've seen a lot of situations, even myself as someone who does not take WheelTrans, where the system is actually creating a lot of problems and then not taking responsibility for the problems that it creates. But the other thing that I wanted to make very clear, I mean, when I was saying that people that are WheelTrans users, there are high penalties and sometimes people are barred for a month, I don't want that to be minimized in any way. I mean, in what city is it acceptable for any other individual citizen to not be able to show up for work for a day, or to not be able to go to medical appointments, or to take their children to childcare and things like that, right? A lot of people in the disability community, specifically if they have physical disabilities, have voiced for a long time that one of their main barriers to gaining employment is they don't have access to reliable transportation. And when you don't have access to reliable transportation and this affects your employment, we see very clearly significant health outcomes that are actually poorer than the general population. And even though WheelTrans and other systems are saying we're doing this to save money, the Auditor General says we need to reduce the amount of failed trips, we're not actually looking at the long-term outcome of not having access to reliable, safe transportation. I just, if the situation were reversed, if all the able-bodied people could sit on the sidelines for a month and just watch the TTC, and watch the streetcars go by, I'm wondering how the city would function, right? And at the end of the day, this idea of that restriction is acceptable is actually not acceptable. It actually says to people with disabilities that what we're doing and our actions as citizens are less valuable than other citizens. So I just wanted to bring that home.
Thank you very much, Terry Lynn. Any other speakers? Okay, Joe to speak.
So the comment then, just to follow up on Terry Lynn and Wendy. Wendy talked about the appeals process, and the appeals process, the time frame to deal with appeals and come to resolutions should be very quick and not something where people are sitting out for a month or so. Just to add that comment.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Any other comments? I'm going to read Tracy's email, and just indulge. It may be I don't believe it's going to require more than 3 minutes, but I know that considering that she is a very active member of our community here, active member of our committee, I know it's an issue that she cares very passionately about. So I'd like to just, in her own words, because she is very articulate when it comes to presenting a position on these matters, I'd like to read this. So I'll do that in my capacity as chair. So she wanted us to read into the records these particular comments. So this is from Tracy Odell. I support the extended eligibility categories for people with sensory and cognitive impairments and also need debilitating treatments like chemotherapy. This policy will go a long way to furthering their independence and participation in the community. My first concern is with the process. I understand that it is still to be determined for determining conditional eligibility. I think it's important for DAAC to be consulted about this. My second concern is with how the family of services will be experienced from the customer's point of view. The map that is provided in the PowerPoint presentation makes it look like people will have a direct ride to the subway station. In my experience, there will be multiple stops along the way to pick up and drop off people, which could mean it could take an hour to get to the subway and then proceed from there. In the scenario presented, if I understand it correctly, it shows the person having to make 3 transfers to get to their destination. First with WheelTrans, then the subway, then the crossover point at a subway. Each of these transfer points may present its own barriers depending on the person's disability and how that disability is manifesting that particular day and exacerbated by other factors such as weather. Community consultation will be key, and it must recognize that people in various situations have different perspectives on how well the new approach will work for them. Eligibility for a family of services should not be not a majority win situation leading to a blanket policy, but instead a case-by-case situation in which the customer determines whether or not the family of services approach will work for them on any given day. People deemed eligible for family of services must not have that approach imposed on them for every trip by TTC policy. That decision, that final decision, trip by trip, must be the customer's. And that's from our member, Tracy Odell. I'm just going to add my own quick comments, and I don't think it's going to take very long. As an able-bodied person who is a human rights activist and someone who really cares about accessibility, knowing that one day we're all going to be living with some type of disability, I'm concerned about not having a human rights equity lens approach to policy making. And equity is very different, as we all know in this committee, from equality. Equity is about making sure that we have a level playing field. So that means that we actually provide opportunities and give people the resources and the tools that they need to have access to those opportunities, because without equity, there is no opportunity and there is no access. So I would ask the TTC, I know you're under a lot of pressure and there's already budget constraints, but this is a human rights issue that I think that we need to put that particular lens, the equity lens, over all our transit planning and service provision. And until that happens in a real meaningful and impactful way that has the outcomes that we're looking for, we're always going to be struggling and not providing a fully equitable series of services to all Torontonians, regardless of their abilities. And with that, we want to thank you for your presentation and all the good work that you are doing and the members of the TTC are doing on behalf of Torontonians. And we welcome you back at any given time. We're looking forward to the next stage of consultation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, yes, sorry. I thank you very much to the clerk who always keeps us on track. I need a motion to receive this presentation. I see, Terry Lynn, thank you very much. So moved and adopted, thank you. And our next presentation is DI 9.2. That is the 5-year review on the Affordable Housing Action Plan. It is not Sean Gadden who's going to be presenting to us, but rather Eric Hunter, who's the Manager of Policy and Partnerships from the Affordable Housing Office. Okay. Thank you, Eve. Anytime you're ready.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Eric Hunter. I'm from the Affordable Housing Office. My director, Sean Gadney, sends his regrets. To my right is Ashley Dalton from Shelter Support and Housing Administration, who are our partners with the Affordable Housing Office in the review of the Housing Opportunities Action Plan. And to my left is Minha Hassim, who's a colleague of mine at the Affordable Housing Office. So thank you very much for inviting us all to the committee and taking the time out to help us review and update the Housing Opportunities Housing Action Plan, also known as HOT. I've got a very short slide presentation, just 6 slides on the review, and we're here to hear from you, so I look forward to your contributions and your consultation input afterwards. So Housing Opportunities Toronto has been guiding the City Council's decisions on affordable housing and homelessness funding and policy since 2010. It was passed by Council after extensive consultations and gave the City a strong mandate to increase and maintain affordable housing and reduce homelessness. But now, HOT is just past the halfway mark, and a lot has changed in the city, both in the housing market and on the policy landscape. So it's time to review and refine the plan so it can be relevant and responsive through to the end of its term in 2020. So our objective isn't to completely rewrite the plan, but to refine it and update it. Over the winter, city staff have been consulting with stakeholder groups like yourselves in meetings like this, and with the public at open roundtable events in each of the community council areas. And our goal is to bring an updated plan to City Council later this fall. So this slide wasn't included in the original presentation, but I thought it was valuable to throw it in. One of the reasons we're taking a bit longer than expected is that, frankly, it's a very exciting time in the affordable housing world with a whole lot going on. This slide shows you some of the things that are happening right now, and to pull out a couple of highlights, the recent federal budget, you may have heard, provided a much-needed infusion of new affordable housing funding for both new construction, home modifications, and repairs. Second, the province has just updated its affordable housing strategy, which, among other things, promises the city new powers for inclusionary zoning, which will require developers, private developers, to build affordable housing in their developments. And the city is also doing its part. We're stepping up by improving our approach to supporting affordable housing development through easier access to our incentive package and expedited planning approvals. We're calling this the Open Door program, and we'll be reporting to our Affordable Housing Committee in June and then off to Council in July.
Eric, if I can just interrupt you for a second, and forgive me, because this is a new slide that's just been introduced that was not in the presentation, if you don't mind just sort of reading all that is in this image, just because there's a lot of information there.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Sorry we didn't get it to the committee in time for the clerk's deadline. So I'll start at the top. So these are all the things that are feeding into our review and our update of the housing plan, and things that are very much live, sort of happening now. We're reviewing our housing access system to develop a housing portal that'll be choice-based. So that's what previously would be called the social housing waiting list. There's a multi-tenant housing review, more commonly known the rooming house review, ongoing at the moment. The municipal licensing and standards in the planning department are leading that. Then there's our Open Door program, which I just mentioned, the federal budget and housing strategy, which I also just mentioned. The planning department is reviewing its home ownership definition in the official plan, which will have a big policy impact on how the city supports affordable housing on the ownership side. And then there's the provincial long-term strategy, which I also mentioned, the TCHC Mayor's Task Force, you may have read about in the press, inclusionary zoning, which is part of the provincial review. The second last circle there is the real estate review, and that's a city review of its real estate system. And the important thing there is that the city's often used surplus parcels of municipal land for affordable housing development. So land has always been a key resource for affordable housing. And then the last one there is the poverty reduction strategy, which you may have also heard about and has serious impacts on affordable housing. So the long and short of it is that we're going to have new tools and new resources available to us in the affordable housing world. And all these things, and including your inputs, will help us inform the revised plan. So to help us with the consultations, we put together a consultation guide and a comments booklet that was based on each of the 8 themes in the action plan. That was made available through the committee's website and is also by the door if anybody would like to grab one. We used 4 overarching questions to guide the consultation. What's worked and what hasn't? How can the city improve its affordable housing and homelessness efforts? And what can you and other city partners, federal, provincial governments, public-private sectors contribute? And I'll quickly go through the 8 theme areas. Each of these is broken down in the plan into a multitude of actions. But just to keep it high level and keep it moving, I'll just go through the theme areas. The first is creating housing opportunities across all neighborhoods in the city. Helping people who are homeless and vulnerable find and keep homes is the second. The third is assisting families and individuals to afford rents. The fourth is preserving and repairing the city's supply of rental housing. 5 is revitalizing neighborhoods, and there's a focus there on Toronto community housing neighborhoods. 6 is creating new affordable rental housing, and part of this is building new accessible rental housing. Number 7 is helping people buy and stay in their homes, and part of that is the Toronto Renovates program that provides funding for accessibility modifications and home repair for seniors and households with a member who's disabled. And 8 is working together, meaning working with stakeholders, including other orders of government and the housing sector. So that's the end of my presentation. Like I said, we're here to hear from you, so I'd like to open it up to questions and comments in the discussion. But one last note, if you'd like to get in touch with us later, here's our email address and our mailing address as well. And we're also more than happy to come back to this committee as the update evolves and heads towards council later in the fall. Thank you. Certainly. So our email is hotupdate@toronto.ca, no spaces. And our mailing address is Hot Update, 55 John Street, 6th floor, Metro Hall, Toronto, Ontario, M5V 3C6.
Great. Thank you very much, Eric, and thank you to your team. I'm sure there are probably some questions coming out of our committee members. I'm going to start on my left-hand side this time around. I see Karma's hand go up, and then Joe, okay, and we'll start from there. Karma, you can go first.
Thanks for the presentation. I just want to ask, okay, because one of the goals of your department is to make homes more, home ownership is important on all of those things. I just want to know is, because I know that for example, I think the Canadian Housing Corporation, like they've stopped their, I think it was a program called RAP. And I know that Toronto has a program, Toronto Renovates, but I know also that, you always have it where there's a periods where you guys aren't accepting any applications, and now I see that you guys are. But then also the fact that, you have income requirements as well, right? I just feel that when I look at this, yes, I do see an effort from the city to make people's homes accessible, but at the same time, I feel that, by having periods where you are accepting applications and not accepting applications, it's sort of contrary to what your main goal is. And also the income, I find, is sort of a barrier, because I look at it and I know that I can't qualify, but then, you know, you're not realizing the fact that I'm spending a lot of my income on my healthcare needs, you know? So I just want to know is, what are you going to do to change this and make it better?
Thank you. Good comments. The Toronto Renovates funding, you're right. We used to have access to a federal program called RAP, the Residential Rehabilitation Assistance Program, and that was canceled by the federal government a few years ago. At the same time, the home repairs and accessibility modifications were made eligible under provincial programs. So what the City of Toronto decided to do was create a home repair program using federal provincial money through the provincial program at the time. That program came with restrictions, guidelines, rules that were written by the province, and the income cutoff is one of those rules that we have no flexibility over whatsoever. So to have access to the money, we need to play by those provincial rules. And on the waiting list issue, it's essentially a resource matter. We would obviously be more than happy to have our access to Toronto Renovates ongoing around the year. But we don't want to end up in a situation where we have a waiting list that's completely unmanageable and people have to wait forever to get our service. So yes, we have shut down the waiting list at times when we felt it was reaching sort of a critical point that it would take us too long to serve people. And then we've opened it up again. So that's how we've chosen to manage it within our staffing resources that are available to us right now. I'm happy to take back any suggestions for improvement.
Thank you very much, Karma. And Joe, to ask questions.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. Can you go back in your slides up to the third slide in your presentation, which was the new graphic? You discussed inclusionary zoning. In your analysis, moving forward, how do you see the impact of inclusionary zoning impacting meeting your targets? Several questions. And also the Mayor's Task Force report on Toronto Community Housing. I was reading through the 24-page document on the HOT progress to date, I guess. And it would seem in your 10-year targets, you've achieved roughly about 25% of your targets at this point. And so I'm wondering, do you feel comfortable that you're going to meet your targets as they were identified at the beginning of 2010? And also what impact the Mayor's Task Force report would have if some of the main recommendations were adopted to essentially chop TCHC into smaller organizations, smaller groups. Because in the Mayor's Task Force report, it talked about the TCHC essentially has 70% of what I think was described as the affordable housing units in Toronto. So they are a major player in terms of providing affordable housing and driving that agenda. And so I'm wondering, at this point, how you see that task force report impacting the goal of achieving the results, and what impact is expected out of inclusionary zoning?
Okay, I hope I can get all your questions, but if I miss anything, just let me know. So off the top, inclusionary zoning, the province made the announcement in the long-term strategy update a few months ago, and has now provided draft legislation. So the draft legislation needs to go through committees before it passes, and there's a long consultation period associated with that. So that's a long answer to your question. What do I think the impact is going to be of inclusionary zoning? We'll see when we finally get it. And then it'll be up to the municipalities like Toronto to implement it themselves. So however it is that the province crafts it, we'll have to then turn around and decide how the city wants to implement it and set up its own policies. Frankly, I've been following inclusionary zoning for years, and it's an incredibly powerful tool where it's implemented well. The United States, the UK, there's examples or forms of it all over the place. I think it's a very smart way to go, and it's, it can certainly deliver new affordable housing in significant numbers, especially in a booming housing market like Toronto's, where we're building so many units every year for the private market. So I do think inclusionary zoning will help us meet our new construction targets. The TCHC task force, I look at that as helping meet their housing repair targets in the Housing Opportunities Plan, and that's one of the key drivers behind the task force, is to get Toronto Community Housing's buildings in a state of good repair. There's a staff review underway at the moment with a report that'll be going to council on the mayor's task force. So again, where they land and where they decide to focus, or where they recommend that council focus its energies on with regard to TCHC, we'll be able to better answer your question after that's happened.
But at this point, no one has done any sort of ballpark rough analysis of what the impacts would be if they went option A or option B. Has that been thought out at all?
I'm sure that the staff team that's working on the review is looking at that kind of analysis, but I can't speak for them.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to, Wendy, are you wanting to ask questions? Okay, actually, before you do that, and you will get to ask your question very shortly. I see more hands going up. That's great. In the back of the presentation that you have that was circulated, part of the agenda, was the actual housing opportunities report, and then behind that was the consultation sort of tool that has been put forward by the Affordable Housing Office. You'll recognize that the 8 themes that Eric spoke about in his presentation, there are guiding questions that this committee should probably give some thought to providing some advice, because that's why they are here today. They're here specifically to say, this is our consultation tool, this is what they're rolling out with, and this is an opportunity to have a more fulsome discussion of what's before us today, which is that sort of mini 5-year review. So if you go to the back of the agenda, there are a series of questions contained in the consultation kit. And if you want to speak to any of those questions that are sitting under those 8 themes, this is probably a good time to provide some reflections on that. But everyone would have received this beforehand. Do you want us to read out some of the questions just to sort of stimulate the discussion? Should I do that? Okay, so Wendy, sorry, hang on to your question, don't lose it, but I just want to make sure we can sort of prime up our next phase of discussion. So I will take the opportunity to do that. So let's talk about creating housing opportunities in all neighborhoods, and out of that would be looking for some key actions and achievements. So questions that will help us drive our comments later on is, how can the Toronto Housing Charter be used to support new affordable housing across the city? So that's in every single neighborhood, not clustered in one or the other. And what should the city and community agencies do to enable and increase community support for affordable housing and more emergency shelters? So that's under the general theme of creating housing opportunities in all neighborhoods. Another one is helping people who are homeless and vulnerable find and keep homes. There are a series of questions, and So Nicole is whispering in my ear. She has a very specific way of wanting to address all the 8 themes. So I'm going to just, and I'm mindful that we are not going to have a lot of time to go through every single theme, but I'm going to propose a few things for you, and maybe I can get the committee to respond to it. So do you want to go through all 8 of those themes? I'm seeing some head shakes, but let me just finish. Do you want to go through all 8 of those themes and read the 2 or 3 or 5 questions that fall under those themes, or can I read them all together and then you pick and choose what you want to specifically speak to? Yes, okay. It's not a perfect democratic process, but I see one person very enthusiastically nodding to the second option. But I do really want to encourage fulsome dialogue today. But I know that there's going to be different pieces of the 8 themes that you're going to want to speak to. It's your job, my friends at Affordable Housing, to take all this and organize it afterwards under the themes that they're coming out of. Is that reasonable? Okay, so I'm just going to continue. Thank you very much for that enthusiastic head nodding. So another theme is help people who are homeless and vulnerable find and keep homes. And the questions that will stimulate the discussion is, how can the city better coordinate access to the supports that tenants of social, affordable, and market rental housing need to achieve greater housing equality? And you can also, if you can see it, it's actually on the screen. Thank you very much, Janice, for helping us. I'm going to read it. I will read the next 3 questions as quickly as I can. How can the city work with private sector landlords to improve access to housing for people leaving homelessness? Another question, how can the city ensure housing stability services are responsive to the needs of groups with specific needs, such as Aboriginal people, women fleeing domestic violence, seniors, youth, LGBTQ2S, and people with disabilities? A follow-up question is, what role should the province and federal government play in expanding Toronto's housing first approach to help more people leave the streets and shelters behind? Theme number 4, assist families and individuals to afford rents. Stimulating questions for the discussion is, how can the city better help people at imminent risk of eviction stay in their homes and avoid becoming homeless? As the city is transforming the social housing waiting list into a more responsive, choice-based system, what can be done to make it easier to access housing assistance? Follow-up question, what can the provincial and federal governments do to better assist families and individuals to afford rents? Theme number 5, preserve and repair rental housing. I'm sure this is one that has a lot of interest. Questions to stimulate discussion is, how can the city, in partnership with other governments, private and nonprofit sectors, and residents, better address repairs to aging housing? What can the city do to better protect existing affordable rental housing, including rooming houses? Theme number 6, revitalize neighborhoods. Questions. What can the City of Toronto do to support more community revitalizations? How can the city better encourage the federal and provincial governments to participate in community revitalizations? Theme number 7, create new, this is the exciting one, create new affordable rental homes. Questions for discussions. What other actions can the city take to facilitate the creation of at least 7,000 more affordable rental homes to achieve a hot goal of 10,000 homes by 2020? What can the private and nonprofit sectors do in partnership with the city? What could the federal and provincial governments do to assist the city in achieving its affordable housing hot goal? And our last theme, oh, actually, no, there's more. Anyways, theme number 8, help people buy and stay in their homes. More questions. How can the city stimulate the creation of more affordable home ownership opportunities for new purchasers to achieve the hot goal of 2,000 homes by 2020? What role could the private and nonprofit sectors play in achieving that goal? What could the federal and provincial governments do to further assist the city in achieving the hot goal? Theme number 9. Working together. We always like this one at this committee. What else can the city do to encourage the federal and provincial governments to maintain and enhance housing funding for social, affordable, and co-op housing? How can housing partners such as the public and private sectors, faith groups, and residents contribute to advocacy efforts on affordable and social housing? A lot of these themes will have questions that will stimulate discussions that I suspect will overlap one another. I'm going back to Wendy, who Okay. So I'm sorry, Wendy, to take so long, because I hope you didn't lose your question. But we are at this stage in time coming together for this special meeting to provide input to the staff on the housing opportunities report. So let's give some thought to those questions, and if you want to identify the theme that you want to speak to, that might help staff have a better sort of method of collecting your thoughts and opinions, and if you want to speak generally to it, that's also fine. Stephanie.
I have a general comment, and then I've got a few points. I don't want to be too lengthy, but...
Yeah, I think it's reasonable at this point in time is that we're providing as much information as possible. So what I'd like to do is not be so prescriptive now. So it's not so much that we're going to ask questions. If you want to ask questions, you can. But we're also going to leave it nice and flexible so the dialogue is more fluid. Okay, go ahead, Stephanie.
Thanks. Well, first, I just want to say I can really appreciate the massive amount of work that is involved in figuring all of this out. So I don't envy you the work you have to do. My comment is, in the report, it looks at accessibility as something separate rather than looking at it through an inclusive lens. And so some of the language in the report, I think, could be rephrased to also include accessibility. And also the issue of universal design. So where you are looking at redeveloping or renovations and such, I think that it's really important to think about universal design, which would potentially make more units accessible, and then persons with disabilities have a wider availability of units that are accessible. So things like, okay, I'm going to go through section 3.2, number 1, where the terminology, it's housing opportunities in all neighborhoods. If I would recommend the word accessible be added as well, and the same for 4.1. And in section 5.2, I would recommend that accessibility and accommodation be factored into the cost of redevelopment, finding accessible homes or retrofitting them, and when you're doing renovations, and again, the notion of universal design. And 5.31, request for funding, add that the funding model should include extra funding for providing accessible units. And I know you talked about the, oh my God, I just blanked out what you were talking with Joe about. Yeah, inclusive zoning, thanks. But again, it still is, it looks like accessibility is something separate rather than an inclusive lens. Section 7, preserve and repair housing, and the statement is well-maintained, safe, and affordable housing. I also think it should include accessible. And 7.3, city actions, under 32C, the maintenance of working smoke alarms. I recommend that that should be visible smoke alarms, which is also, I believe, in the Ontario Building Code now. Okay. And then in section 11.1, the working groups, just my comment is to ensure stakeholders have representation from persons with disabilities to ensure that the plan is being looked at through an inclusive lens.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Any other comments? Great. Rahima, and then Victoria, then Yin.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a comment. As many of you know, I am a vice president on the Co-op Housing Federation of Toronto, CHFT. I wanted to say how much CHFT has appreciated our good working relationship with the City of Toronto Affordable Housing Office. We are anxious to continue working together to create more housing and to maintain housing for our low-income members. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Rahima. Victoria.
So this follows under how the city can help people avoid imminent eviction and homelessness. I looked into the rent bank, which is mentioned, and I had never heard of it myself, and I live in a low-income area. And most of the people who would qualify according to the City of Toronto site are not people who would be relying on a lot of social services, so they wouldn't have someone there to tell them that this is something that they would qualify for, because you have to be paying most of your rent, be in a market rent apartment, and have steady income and have it be kind of an emergent situation. So I think for that, there needs to be more awareness made to the public, especially in these areas, that this is an option that they can take.
Thank you, Victoria. Yin?
Hi, this is the first time I've ever heard of any of these initiatives, and I think for the blind and partially sighted community, we don't get access to the information, therefore we are often left out. So I just wonder what ways, not only that your information is accessible and then we can, get online and all that, but just disseminating these consultation opportunities. I personally know of 4 or 5 organizations or groups that can help with this, but I'm very concerned that perhaps our community is totally ignorant of all these great initiatives.
Great. Thank you very much. Actually, Yin, do you mind if I ask if, did you want to follow up your comment with maybe some specific recommendations on how they can, number one, get the information out to a larger group of people who have interest? Because I do think that you've touched on a point that I think, quite honestly, is an issue that plagues all of City of Toronto consultation from time to time, is that those who have greatest voice will be able to voice their concerns, and then communities that are more vulnerable don't often get to the table. So, not to put you on the spot, but if you want to give some thought to providing some other suggestions, that would be helpful. I can come back to you if you like. Karma, Joe, Wendy.
Hi. So my, I guess, suggestions and discussion points are all related to number 8, home ownership. So when reading your report, I saw things about a second mortgage for people who can't afford regular housing. So I understand, it is a good idea to have a second mortgage, but I'm just wondering, because I know the interest rates for those second mortgages tend to be quite high. And I know people who, have second mortgages, so, they'll first buy the home, and then, a couple of months later, they'll, pay off that second mortgage with their regular, with their bank and everything, right? But I'm just wondering, for somebody with a disability whose income might be lower than the average person, like how are they, going to get a bank to loan them that extra money to pay off that second mortgage? So, and I feel that, again, at the end of the day, the person with a disability is going to be in a less advantage, with less advantage, because they're ending up paying more than a person who might, an able-bodied person who's most likely earning more than them. And the other thing also I would like to mention is the fact that, the other burden a person with a disability is going to face is the fact that to resell their home is going to take longer, and most likely they won't be able to resell it as easily as somebody whose house, has zero modifications, right? And again, so not only, is that person being, maybe punished in other ways, but, you're facing that difficulty, enormous difficulties there. And so again, there was a part in your report, I think it was on around page 36, where you're talking about breaking the cycle of poverty. But I think also that needs to be mentioned is that, it is important for the city to build and maintain a strong housing presence within the city, just because, it's going to be closer to the jobs and it's going to be closer to reliable transportation. Because I've lived, in Mississauga areas, and I can tell you the transportation between Peel region and TTC is very, very different, And the other thing also is the fact that a lot of the condo developments you see nowadays, they opt for these very small condos. And I've personally visited some, and I really don't know how you can make those condos specifically accessible, because the bathrooms are just so small. And I think there needs to be a greater push in making condos that are more family oriented, like a 3-bedroom condo that will be big enough for, let's say, a family to live there, and even big enough to make it accessible in the long run. So that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Joe?
So I guess I would like to just reemphasize the comments that both Stephanie and Ian made about having more of a disability lens applied to whatever consultations that you have going on. Because I think the comment was made that we're talking about affordable housing. And I think that the community most affected by affordable housing should probably, as they say, be at that table to participate in that, to give you some good guidance on issues. Also, Stephanie made reference to universal design, and she's correct. I mean, accessible design should be involved. There are other design standards that are being worked on. The city is working on its own accessible design. AOTA also stipulates things, and the building code, I understand, OBC is being changed. While universal standard, I understand Stephanie wants to make that point clear, it's falling a little bit behind, and there are better standards to be applied. And also, a comment I have, and I don't know it's necessarily applicable to this presentation, but with respect to the mayor's task force, I mean, it does discuss recommendations and changes to the largest landlord in Canada, which does, by their own report, provide 70% of social affordable housing. And I think as this committee, a body of consumer advocates for the city, the report might be something that we as a committee may want to look at and analyze and give our feedback to the mayor's office as well about what we think is positive or negative in that report, because it could have significant impact when you consider the amount of affordable housing that is tied up in the corporation. So I'm just thinking maybe that's something we can look at as a committee.
Great, thank you, Joe. Wendy.
Thank you for the presentation. Very interesting. Very, very complex area. A lot of different initiatives, a lot of different perspectives on what works. I was really pleased to see Housing First being rolled out and adopted. I wanted to ask for some clarification around one of the requests to the federal and provincial governments, and then maybe I can respond. The request is that the federal and provincial governments, the provincial government increases the cap on rent scales for social assistance recipients and rent geared to income housing to match the maximum shelter allowances provided by Ontario Works and the Ontario Disability Support Program. Could you just speak a little bit to the thinking behind that and the motivation for that recommendation?
Which recommendation is that one? Do you have the number on you? Okay.
Primary ones here. It's 7.3.1. One of the places is number 35.
I think in general, it's just making sure, looking at housing affordability and how much of a challenge that is for people who are on Ontario Works and Ontario ODSP. And so trying to make sure that there's more income available and better income security so people are able to afford rents. So specifically in terms of the city often and Shelter Support and Housing will advocate to other levels of government and to the provincial government to raise the shelter component so that it's more likely that people are able to afford and to be able to keep their home. And so I think a lot of the advocacy around this is really, okay, how do we help people find and keep their homes?
Can I respond? So the reason why I wanted you to clarify it for me is when I read that, it sounds a bit like asking for the rent scales to be increased in rent geared to income so that there could be more rent paid within a rent geared to income context. And I guess my issue is, without an increase also across the board in terms of the supports that people on Ontario Works and on ODSP might receive, if you're looking at a bigger chunk of somebody's check going to rent, you're actually talking about less money for that individual to live. And in the context of people with disabilities in particular, and people on Ontario Works, very little money coming to people anyway in terms of their monthly checks. If we're actually making a recommendation for there to be more money spent on rent, and I can understand, I think the impetus might be behind motivation to provide more housing spaces because, potentially there's more money attached to them. But the impact of that could potentially be that people with disabilities are living with less money because the money that would otherwise go to rent is being used for food and maybe a TTC pass if they can afford it. So I guess I just wanted to offer some caution around this recommendation that the end result might actually be a net loss for persons with disabilities unless I'm misreading this.
Sounds like we have to watch out for unintended consequences. Terry, Lynn.
I read that the same way that you read it, but now I'm also hearing from, I forget your name, I'm sorry. Ashley, I'm hearing from Ashley that wasn't the intention behind that. And I also did want to say, I know that ODSP and OW sort of, on paper, it looks like nice and neat as to how much goes to housing and how much goes to cost of living, when in real life, most people are paying for their housing first and then trying to figure out how to pay for groceries and other things later, regardless of if they have, if they're in rent geared to income or if they're in other systems within the TCHC. I have a lot of comments, and I'm trying to organize them in my head, and I'm trying to be mindful about what I want to say. Most of my comments, I believe, are related to, for whatever reason I can't see, related to the second point, or the second theme. how to help people who are homeless and vulnerable find and keep homes. And number 3, so the question for number 3 is, how can the city ensure housing stability services are responsive to the needs of groups with specific needs such as Aboriginal people, women fleeing domestic violence, seniors, youth, LGBTQ2S people, etc., and folks with disabilities? I know it's been said here before, and I'm kind of channeling Tracy because I know it's something that's near and dear to her heart. But one of the things that we've sort of talked about a lot on this committee that doesn't seem to be implemented in anything that I read in preparation for this meeting is sort of access to attendance. I know that folks can go into attendant care situations through the TCHC and that those existing resources are incredibly limited. So folks that do need access to housing and access to attendance typically wait much longer on the wait list. And I don't have stats on that, but I'm confident in that assertion. And so one of the things that we've talked about before, because we wanted to sort of make comments on how it is people are accessing specifically shelter services, is how is shelter services going to provide people access to attendance? Because there are some people that are, I try not to use the word vulnerable too much, but like significantly underserviced in the disability community in that way. And I still don't see anything like in these reports, and also reports that we've read previously on the committee, and I would like that to be addressed somewhere. I also wanted to mention the cash system again, which is the centralized access to supportive housing, which is intended right now for people with mental health difficulties and disabilities. And one of the things that I've brought up previously is that currently in the cash system, there isn't a way that exists that if you are dealing with different levels of embodiment. So let's say you do have a bipolar disability, or you are experiencing PTSD, but you're also like a wheelchair user, or you also have physical needs. There's no way to really successfully apply to the cash system and expect that you get supports, even though it's termed supportive housing, right? And that's, I feel, given the current state of affairs, I feel like that's a misnomer. So that also needs to be looked at. And the other pieces that I wanted to say specifically to this, theme on question 2 is that particularly with some populations that I've worked with, the zoning requirements for, let's say, access to like food or access to like a community service and things are very, very strict to particular zones or particular silos, even though folks in the community could be experiencing lots of different areas of oppression. They can't access those services and supports, even though they're fairly unique and would help them a lot. So if the city could find ways to loosen up their zoning requirements for things not to be just in areas which used to be called like investing neighborhoods, I think that would be helpful. And that particular comment is something that we've been working on in TIES, the Toronto Youth Equity Strategy, to try to loosen up those requirements. And also, the other comment that I had was around Aboriginal folks, and I'm not Aboriginal, so I need to make that plain. But I also wanted to say that a lot of services for Aboriginal people are around like still people with status, and I know that the federal government is trying to make changes to that, but I think sometimes those status requirements can be a barrier to people that do identify as being Aboriginal and have a lot of claim to those services as well, but are not accessing service. And I wanted to speak to, I'm glad that Victoria made reference to the rent bank. Currently, I think at the rent bank, you can call 2 days a week and then someone will answer the phone. But at the moment, I see it as a very inaccessible service to members of the community. I think that needs to be looked at in a more comprehensive way.
Any other comments, feedback? Okay, I'm gonna take it. Oh, Wendy, please go ahead.
So this is just more of a wide-ranging comment too, but within the context of people with disabilities who are on ODSP, it's very difficult to see how there can be access to the housing, to the property ladder in any context because of the limits in terms of eligibility for savings. So people who are on ODSP and people with disabilities are on ODSP, there's no opportunity to ever accrue enough savings to even come close to being able to afford housing. And I don't know where that goes in terms of the recommendations that you might be in the process of making or our ongoing process here, but it's a significant barrier, and it means that, you know, owning a house at any point in your life, if you're a person with a disability on ODSP, it's probably out of the question. And I just thought that it needed to be noted.
Karma.
I would also like to, well, that's where I was saying that the second mortgage would come in, right? Where, you know, it becomes it looks very beneficial in the beginning, but then it becomes a barrier in the long term because of the interest rates that you're paying. But my other comment I would like to make is that, because I know from Vancouver, when they were doing their whole housing changes and stuff, there was a lot of negative feedback from construction companies and so on and so forth. They were just discussing this little issue about the doorknob, you know, but it was made into such a big deal. And what I would like to say is, you know, yes, people with disabilities right now are, you know, have lower incomes, but, you know, we're going slowly in the positive direction where people with disabilities are getting better jobs and more education and so on and so forth. So I would like it also, you know, the situation might not be the greatest right now, but for the message also to be the fact that, you know, that there is a lot of buying power there, that, you know, when you make things accessible, it doesn't cost extra really in the end. I mean, just there's maybe a tiny extra cost, but not a long-term cost, and that there's more benefits to society in the long run, you know. And I hope that is something that you can bring forth when you speak to all of the external and internal partners. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Eric, did you want to respond?
Yes, please. I'd like to clarify a point about the second mortgages. I wanted to speak after your original comment, but there may be confusion about second mortgages because the way the affordable ownership programs work is through second mortgages. But those aren't private second mortgages. Those aren't second mortgages you get from a bank or from another lender where you would be charged very high interest rates. Those second mortgages are really just the tool for the city to provide a down payment assistance loan. And those loans are completely interest-free, and there's no payment required on them. So they're called it's called a silent second mortgage. So essentially it's used as down payment assistance, and it brings down the amount of money that you need to get from a bank or provide as your own cash down payment when you're buying a home. So the city currently works with nonprofit groups to deliver that extra down payment assistance. We work with Habitat for Humanity, Artscape, Options for Homes, a variety of nonprofit groups in Toronto, who also bring some resources to the table to further bring down the cost of the home. So the second mortgage we're talking about is never a private second mortgage where somebody's being exploited.
No, I'm not saying that person is being exploited, right? It's not, that is not the goal. You know, I do know about Options for Homes, and they work with, I think, Home Alternative, I forget what the home ownership alternative or something. But I do know that there is an interest rate associated with that. And it is a lot higher than an interest rate that you can get from the bank, right? So that's why I'm saying that it seems a bit punitive in the end, right?
It's actually, because there's no payment required on that second mortgage, that second mortgage is only paid back when you sell the home. At that point, there's a share of appreciation that's taken as well, but it's a good deal.
Terry Lynn.
I wanted to point out too, and I'm not quite sure trying to formulate these thoughts in my head. But options for homes and things like Habitat for Humanity, one of the key values that those systems has implemented, and they've done it quite well, is there's this idea of buy-in, right, of ownership. So people have to do things to in order to qualify for, let's say, Habitat for Humanity, and people have to contribute to the buildings that they live in if they're part of options for homes. And one of the things that I think is lacking in a lot of the housing services that are in Toronto, particularly for people that are most marginalized, is this idea of buy-in, that they have to do something in order to remain in the housing environment things, and that there's a partnership, right? So I know like a lot of people that are, for example, trying to get their foot in the door in terms of getting jobs, or trying to get their foot in the door in terms of even volunteering, and they're not seen as a resource to that housing environment that they live in, or they're not seen as a resource in that community, and that's not necessary. Like, it's not necessary for that system to exist that way or evolve that way. People can actually support each other, as opposed to having like so much of a staff environment of like people with professionalized skills and things like that. Not that that's not needed, but there needs to be buy-in within those systems so that people can gain skills so that they can use it in the workforce. I think that's important. And I also wanted to say that a few other things. I've been a resident of two privately owned apartments that the rent has gone up, even though it's way above what is currently allowed, because the landlord has gone to the city and has said, we need to make this exception. And I think for me, as a low-income resident, it would be good. I have no idea, I still don't understand those loopholes, but it would be good if those loopholes were closed. If that could not be the case. I don't know the ins and outs of that. And I would also say that throughout these reports, two things were alluded to. So a national housing strategy that has existed since before I was born. Like, that idea has existed since before I was born. So we need to like not encourage the government to do it. We need, like, the government just needs to do it. And the other thing that was alluded to that's now doesn't exist anymore, because I used to work for them, is the Mental Health Commission of Canada. We still have policies and those are written, but there was never actually a phase 2. So a national mental health strategy hasn't happened. And I feel like if those two strategies actually existed, we could make more headway on these particular issues.
Okay. Thank you very much, Terry Lynn. Any other comments and feedback? No? Okay, so I've got a couple, if I can just toss this out. Under the opportunity to create new affordable rental homes, the City of Toronto has a large sites policy that's embedded in the official plan, and that the requirement is that for any development site that's 5 hectares and larger, there has to be the provision of 20% affordable housing. And I've said this in a couple of different venues, is that I don't quite understand why we are not looking at vertical communities. For example, a 5-story podium plus a 60-story tower on top of that podium is approximately 45,000, or 50,000 square meters, which is approximately 5 hectares of coverage. So by the standard template of how we do business and prescribe the creation of new affordable rentals, that should stipulate 20% of affordable new rentals in every 60-story tower in downtown Toronto. And I really think that we have to not place a one-size-fits-all policy lens in the urban part of the city, or even in the suburbs, which has dense cores, downtown suburbs, that we don't place that type of thinking and that type of policy lens over that. We are missing opportunities. And I know the development industry is going to be up in arms, and there'll be a lot of heavy lobbying and we can anticipate their response, but I'm actually very interested in knowing how do we put that into a new sort of discussion around vertical communities. And right now, as I see it, the teal core discussions that are taking place across the city, and they're going to come out with a brand new recommendation. There's no mention of affordable housing in teal core, and they've actually decoupled that from the inclusionary zoning discussions, thinking that that's going to happen in another stage, and I think that would be a grand mistake for not to embed that into the teal core discussions, because the teal core discussion and work is going to result is going to create a secondary plan that will overlay 3 wards in downtown Toronto where you see the heaviest development pressures. So there's a opportunity that we are going to miss if we actually don't tie them all up together and do it as quickly as possible. And I would hate to think that you're doing one track of consultation, the teal core folks are doing another track of consultation, how do we grow a vibrant, inclusive, sustainable downtown, and you're going to miss each other. And they're the ones that actually have the secondary plan tool in mind, which will give us greater planning strength. So I implore you to make your case to your colleagues. The other thing about creating inclusive, sort of affordable housing in all neighborhoods is that the rooming house policy has got to be expanded across the city. Right now, it's the old city of Toronto. You can apply for a rooming house license, and we want these properties to be licensed. But quite honestly, illegal rooming houses exist across the entire Toronto area. The only difference is that they're not licensed. They're not licensed in other parts of the amalgamated city, which means that those tenants who are living in those illegal rooming houses are living in unsafe conditions because we don't have a chance to go in and do the annual inspections for the CO detectors, smoke detectors, fire-rated doors. And that is a massive policy gap. And I know, again, there will be balking from some of perhaps colleagues who represent the more suburban parts of our city, but we all have to recognize that building an inclusive city means inclusive neighborhoods regardless of where you are, and I think that's a key component. And I know that the planning policy staff are very keen in trying to elevate the discussion about a wide range of affordable housing options, and that's got to include rooming houses. And finally, because last 48 hours I've been talking about the Expo, the World Expo 2025. In 2006, when Toronto was considering a bid for the Expo, and I'm just going to put this out there, and that was for the 2015 Expo. Part of that proposal included about 1,900 units of new affordable housing. And if we are going to develop this working group with the federal and provincial government to determine whether or not we're going to be able to make this proposal fly, the Expo, there's an opportunity to create a real legacy project that includes more housing, more transit, more infrastructure, more opportunities, more access. But there's an opportunity to take that as a vehicle to create a permanent intergovernmental working group on issues that really are all 3 levels of government responsibility. And we heard from the city manager yesterday during the long-term fiscal plan discussions is that this is now needing a Toronto response because the other order governments have pretty much abandoned their responsibility. I would like us to think through not working in silos, but rather being as ambitious as you possibly can be to embed yourself in the other broad policy discussions at the city. And I know it's tough because you are the small, little, but mighty affordable housing office, but we have to carve out some space for you. And you have to be part of the discussion to drive the values of decision making. Because if we don't have you there, driving it with the value proposition that housing first is a priority for the City of Toronto and we have to commit to it, then I am fearful that we're going to continue to create policies in the city that don't intersect. And if that happens, we lose tremendous opportunity. And there will be the community members who are here and a broad range coalition of voices that will be very supportive of you doing that. I know it's tough because you're the small and mighty group that doesn't always get recognized. And I know that it's not easy because you don't have a very large budget. But I encourage you to do the very best that you can to elbow your way to the chief planner's table and to the city manager's table and to every political decision maker's table, including the mayor, and say there's opportunities here. And we have to measure the outcome. Because right now I'm seeing a lot of replacement units in the revitalization of neighborhoods. And I'm not seeing a lot of new affordable housing. So all we're doing is tearing down TCHC block housing and replacing it with the same. We're not increasing the volume, and yet we have 100 to 150 new migrant residents coming to live in our city every year. And they're not going to all live in luxury condominiums in Yorkville. Sorry for taking up that time, but I had to get that off my chest. Are there any other comments, or can we thank our staff who've come before us and let you know that you have the support of this committee and the work that you do? Thank you very much for coming forward to speaking to us as DAYAC. I know this committee is always very, very grateful, and they expect this when you come to speak to them before the policies are finalized. So, great. Thank you very much. Can I get a motion to receive the... before I get a motion to receive the report, I recognize that there's a gentleman here who would like to speak to this item. So with that, thank you, staff, and we're going to hand over the microphone to Mr. Mark Harris. Thank you very much, Mr. Harris.
I'm Mark Harris, and I ran for municipal elections for 2014. And in 2004, I made a proposal to restore all TCHC homes so the youths can be involved. It took 1 year to make a feasibility study.
Thank you.
And then they gave Amoresco the contract to manage the whole $1 billion. This $1 billion finished in 4 years. This is the 10th year anniversary from 2006 to present. And what I find is from 2006 to 2009, the city sold 10,000 homes. From 65,000 units to present, they're 33,000 units. Their management, that is, they have a computer, they have an ATM machine, they print off a list of people monthly payment and they take it off. Now some people are paying $212 and the rent is $139. I want to know how can they take that money off without doing wire fraud. And I come into the city for the past since 2009, and don't want to investigate their management solution. The city can't be repairing the building and not repairing kitchen cabinets. There's the integrity. The city is here to repair. The city is here to repair the content of what they own, the kitchen cabinets, the closet. I'm being evicted because a lot of people come to me to do applications and and the tenant board cases and this and that. And what I found, there's something called transposition also, because people who don't, the rent, the checks don't belong to, it's on their statement. But the major problem, they have people in the building are paying double rent, and they can't talk to the staff because some of them is from Lebanon, some of them disabled, they can't talk properly, and they would never try to understand them. And since 2009, TCHC said, not Dell Management said how they fired 2 workers. Now these same 2 workers went to another location. Another 2 workers was fired early December, January, and they gone to another location, and we continue the cycle. And I made a proposal to Dell Management to make goodwill when they had 1 building, and the city ended up giving them 5 buildings, and none of these buildings ain't got ain't up to standard. The taps are leaking. I gotta fix it. The whole of December, I repaired people's kitchen cabinets. I repaired the closet. I start picking up old furniture and restoring it just because I'm injured, just to be active. This morning, somebody come and tell me the whole building is with drugs, with popping pills, Valium, depressant. The city is causing people to get depressed because the city just finding programs, just feeding programs that people don't really want. People want to be active. And I start picking up furniture and putting it on the internet and showing what I've done because I pick up 100-year-old furniture. I plan to give the museum at Thompson Park. Now I call Thompson Park and they asked me to do the history of it. Now, whoever with Dell Management or the city saw me doing it, now when they take down furniture from the building, they break it up. And this is not the issue. The issue, they got a lot of closet doors that they're reinstalling, new doors.
Mr. Harris, if I can ask you to wrap up your final thoughts.
That the parts can be used for one another. A drawer might be damaged from here, and 2 drawers might be damaged from there, but instead they supply whole new kitchen cabinets, and they throw out everything. Call the matching and everything, they throw it out, but I want to maintain. Janet Davis was asking about steps what tenant can take. I want you to relay this message to her. You can use T2. And that is what I'm using against Dell Management Solution because I have a hearing the 6th of June.
Okay.
And I'm going to go further. I'm going to find out who I can bring charges against because I know they're doing wiretapping because somebody can't be paying $212.
Mr. Harris, thank you very much. There may be questions for you from the committee members.
Mr. Harris, I didn't catch it, but I'm wondering, like, you mentioned doing work and things. I'm wondering which company you represent?
I registered a lobbyist, and my business is down now because I have debilitating injuries, my neck, my back, and my shoulder.
Okay.
And my interest is because I made a proposal in 2004 to restore all TCHC homes. And I see year after year, homes are being sold and nobody cares. And I brought proposal and recommendation to the city. I brought the proposal for kitchen garden. Prior to that, I made a proposal to restore TCHC homes so the youth can be involved, and it just went to Shonda. I made proposal for unemployment insurance so it can have accumulative hours instead of consecutive hours so people can go back to school.
Okay.
So sorry, is there a follow-up question, Terry Lynn?
Yes, I'm going to try.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. And Mr. Harris, if I can ask you just answer the question, but not to
elaborate?
Yes, okay. Let's just keep it specific.
Okay. The other thing I want to know is, I know you were here for the whole meeting, so you saw the themes that we were discussing. Do you have any suggestions that sort of speak to those themes that you would like the committee to consider?
If you have a bad management, you have bad tenants. If you have bad tenants, they become depressed. And when new staff comes, the tenant, the resident, try to damage these new staff vehicles. And that will happen in January. Because people are so angry, they started damaging the management vehicle. Because every problem they have with the management, Dell management changed them. What I'm saying, if you get $1 billion to repair housing, by the time you have all these committees and task force, you would only have $500 million, and that will happen with the last $1 billion.
Mr. Harris, there may be another question for you.
So this committee is volunteer-based, so I hope that clears that up. But I'm wondering if you have like a specific recommendation or suggestion that you would like the committee to consider. Because I
This city is there
I agree that there are
to repair kitchen cabinet. This is all, repair kitchen cabinet and building.
Okay.
For the last three years, I made a proposal concerning flooding on the basketball court.
Yeah.
But instead they do the driveway, which was done badly, and instead the basketball court is flooding.
So,
And there's a problem with the drainage out to the roads.
So if I can ask, I know that Mr. Harris, I recognize that you're speaking to something that's very specific, but I think in the general context of what we're considering, it's actually citywide policy, and doesn't mean that there aren't systemic issues that need to be addressed. I am just looking at the clock, and I know that there are folks who have already started to leave, and I can see you putting on your jacket. And I also know that part of the opportunity here is to actually provide you a chance to speak to the item, which has now been recorded, I think, by staff. They're actually listening, because the matter is not necessarily before us at the moment. We wanted to provide our comments, and now you've been able to provide your comments to the staff as part of their review on the affordable housing strategy. So I know that staff was taking some notes. I see them scribbling away. So hopefully that this forum was helped enable that. And I want to ask Terry Lynn, just so you know, your time for questions has come to an end. Yeah. Do you have a follow-up question, or can you let it go? Because I'm trying to. I think I need to wrap up the meeting before I lose a few other members.
Just one suggestion.
Go ahead.
You seem to be speaking quite a lot about repairs. The TCHC has put more money into repairs. Could a suggestion that you want to bring forward is that the TCHC continues to do that? Because there are a lot of buildings with the TCHC that are in a state of disrepair, as they say.
I used to do building maintenance since '93. I used to work with a company named Task
Mr. Harris?
Maintenance.
I'm sorry, would that be helpful?
Yeah.
Okay.
Task Maintenance. I want to tell you how this company run. This is one manager.
Sorry, Mr. Harris, I hate to interrupt you, but we're really quite off topic. But what I can say is that I know that there's a series of consultations that will take place. I recognize that you want to speak to something very specific, but I have a feeling that what you have to provide us is very rich, but also very detail focused and fulsome. And what I'm going to do is to encourage you, because you're, in some ways, I hear you repeating what you have already stated about 8 minutes ago.
Ma'am, you were just delaying what you were just taking up time,
No,
and
actually,
everybody want to leave.
Sorry, sir. I'm actually not taking up time, but rather trying to bring a conclusion to this meeting, because we've actually reached the end of our agenda. But what I can say is our staff person has recorded the information over here for the DAC committee. We've have staff who've heard your presentation. And I know that what you're speaking about is very specific to a condition that has a scenario that's I guess, come forth, but this committee is not going to be able to address that very specific one item that you're talking about. They can provide some comments and questions to the broader policy, but it won't be specific or oriented. But I will stay behind if you want to speak to me, and I can relay this information to staff if you want to have that further conversation. I'll make myself available.
Can I have 1 more minute? The practicality of this, of running a building. Ma'am, if you want to overcome repairs to a building, you can't have technicians, people who don't know to repair kitchen cabinets.
I'm very sorry,
And
sir,
for the
but-
past 10 years, this is what's going on. The management building don't have couldn't repair kitchen cabinet, patch a wall. I see a contractor, he patching a wall and he painting before he patch it. And next 3 years, they got to come back and do the same repairs. Nobody don't want to take the actual facts. I'm a shop steward with Local 27 Union up until 2007. And I work in New York too. And I know what's going on, and nobody don't want to address it because you can't have 2 technicians and then you getting contractors that wasted money.
Mr. Harris, thank you very much. I will need a motion from the committee to receive the staff report and to receive, I think, all comments that have been provided to them today. Can I see a hand for that? Thank you, Wendy. With that, we have moved to adopt the staff, moved to receive the staff presentation and comments from the public. And I want to say thank you very much for coming out to the special meeting, meeting number 9. I think it was a very good discussion. There was a lot that was delivered. And Mr. Harris, I will stay behind to talk to you if you like. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.